Well, we don't usually get breaking news right before the segment that is so relevant for the breaking news, but the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals are making a trade, and Joe Flacco is going to the Bengals. They needed a quarterback upgrade. Hopefully they're getting it. Cleveland certainly did not get a quarterback upgrade with Joe Flacco. He was really bad. He averaged 5.1 yards per attempt with the Browns. A couple years ago with the Browns, he averaged 7.9 yards per attempt. So hopefully he's still got something left in the tank as we welcome you back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. And this is huge news, more so for Chase and Higgins. So, Jamey, take it away. Your analysis of this trade, according to Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero, the Bengals trading for Joe Flacco.
I mean, look, they got another version of Jake Browning, but maybe it's a more competent version of Jake Browning. He's not going to be mobile. He's going to still have to deal with that bad offensive line that Browning was dealing with. But give the Bengals credit for at least trying. Now, we would have preferred, let's say, a Jameis Winston or somebody that could, I think, take the receiving core to another level. But like you said, we've seen Flacco in his history do this. We just got to get him now to play for the Steelers at some point, and he gets the whole AFC North locked up. But at this point, look, give the Bengals some credit for trying. It hasn't been working with Browning. The interceptions have been an issue. At least when you saw last week for Chase in particular, I know Higgins had the touchdown. When the matchup is not so overwhelming, where the quarterback play is going to be such a deficit, they still have the ability to produce at a high level. And so the 2 weeks prior, where they struggled with the defenses that they faced, then they play the Lions with that bad secondary. This is going to be a tough matchup still against the Green Bay Packers. You expect at least, he's coming in with the ability to get the game plan in, showing up on Tuesday, so they could do all their installs for Flacco on Wednesday, and he's most likely starting against the Packers. But I just give them credit for trying. They're trying to salvage their season 2-3 after a 2-0 start, lose 3 straight games after losing Joe Burrow. They just got to try and stay close to 500 until Burrow is able to come back, and maybe they can make a playoff push. But for the receivers, for fantasy, this is me a slight upgrade. I'm definitely starting Jamar Chase. I was starting him anyway. He was a top 10 wide receiver for this week. Higgins gets closer now to the top 24. You need to see it. But I do think that if we are talking about one thing in particular, the downfield throws will be there for Higgins. That's something that Jake Browning has not been doing, and I think Higgins will benefit the most from this.
And we saw that with Flacco in Cleveland. His attempt rate on passes of 15-plus air yards was 21.3%. That's higher than what Jake Browning was at. I also want to tell you that Flacco had a better catchable throw rate than Jake Browning. And he also had 11 drops by his receivers in Cleveland. That's pretty much why his completion rate was lower than Jake Browning. So he's going to take more chances downfield. That's great for both wide receivers. And the Bengals are going to have to continue to throw. Their defense is, if it gets better at all, it'll only be nominally better. They're really not in a position for that defense to be great, so you know what the game script is going to be every week. And you also know that Joe Flacco doesn't consistently throw to his running backs out of the backfield. I know in week 1 for Cleveland, he threw a ton to those running backs. Not sure he's going to do it that much, so that might hurt Chase Brown just a little bit. I think it's like you said, Jamey, it's a slight upgrade for Chase and Higgins, and it gives them somebody that will be willing to throw a little bit further downfield and isn't as bad as the stats made him look when he was in Cleveland.
I hope so. He throws a lot. I mean, he very often throws 40 or more pass attempts. So I don't see why that wouldn't necessarily continue. That's kind of how the Bengals run their offense. They like to throw the ball as well. So we're in a Superflex league together. I don't have that much money left. I put in a bid for Joe Flacco, who I originally drafted and then dropped, and now I'm trying to get him back. It is what it is. But I guess from that perspective, I can't imagine people are going to pick him up in a 1 QB league, but maybe he's got Chase and Higgins. How much of your fab would you spend based on your original budget in a Superflex league for Joe Flacco?
If they're committing to him for the rest of the season, you got to go north of 15%. I mean, we're talking about, again, this is scarce quarterback production. And so many people, I know I did in one Superflex league, spent a lot of their fab on Jake Browning, with the idea of this receiving core, this offense is going to build that quarterback up to the level of 18-plus points per game on a consistent basis. That's what Browning was doing in 2023 when he was a starter for those 7 games. That's obviously what Joe Burrow does. I mean, we just haven't seen it for the majority of this tenure. Week 2, when he stepped in, he had great fantasy production. Week 5, he had great fantasy production. You know what you're getting. I think Flacco's going to be a similar type of player. So that 2023 season when Flacco came back, I know it feels like it's forever ago, and he's now gone from 38 years old to 40, so he's not getting any better. But he was consistently 300 yards in the last 5 games, 5 of the last 6 games. He was over 20 fantasy points in that stretch as well. So he still has that ability. And I do think to compare the Cleveland situation and the Cincinnati situation, not exactly fair because this receiving core just is so much better. So yes, he did struggle with the Browns to start the season. Yes, he's older and probably washed up. But hopefully the Bengals are making the move that this guy is still going to have something left to really just elevate that offense as a whole.
Yeah, those receivers will absolutely help his numbers. And it's kind of funny. He's playing the Packers for the second time this year. Remember, he took them on already earlier this year with Cleveland. And who won that game, by the way?
He won.
He won that game. So
Crushed
his
them.
numbers weren't great. It stung for fantasy. But he's got some experience against this opponent. So I don't know if we're ready to just say Cincinnati's going to fold up shop and not get any points this week against the Packers. Tough matchup, but Flacco has some experience against them already.
Yeah, I just want to we know that they made the trade. We don't know who the starter is for this week. They might think it's too soon. They might be just getting depth and putting Jake Browning on notice, saying,
It's
you
Flacco.
got one more chance. Well, probably, but just we don't know that yet. They haven't announced it. So to make a trade on a Tuesday and have them start on a Sunday might be kind of difficult, although the fact that he already faced them does help.
I mean, this is a guy that came off this couch and started for the Browns once upon a time. Like, he's going to be fine.
Right, and he's been in a version of this offense multiple times in his career.